You're listening to the IWD406 Podcast with your hosts, Julie Walls and Kate McLaughlin.
Today on the podcast, we have Emily Swisher. Emily Swisher is a licensed psychotherapist specializing in equine interventions and trauma. She holds a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in clinical counseling, certified in EMDR, and as a therapeutic riding instructor. Emily combines trauma expertise with equine interventions. She advocates for women's rights and authored the novel Stable, exploring how horses and in-personal development, trauma recovery, and mindful living. Without further ado, Emily Swisher!
Welcome, Emily.
Yes.
Yay, Emily. We're so excited to see you.
I'm so excited to be here.
And
I love learning about horses and talking about horses. So I have to jump right in
I
on that.
know, right?
Absolutely.
I know. And you're just, look at your bio. It's like insanity. Like all the background and everything. We're going to dive deeper into it. But our first question is...
Were you born in Montana?
I was not. I was born in Colorado, but as a horse girl, Montana was a dream. I grew up around that time that the movie The Horse Whisperer came out.
Nice.
And so in my mind, Montana was just this like grand mountainous place where people love horses and developing relationships with horses, which absolutely exists up here. So I always have that image in the movie where the mom pulls into the ranch and stops in the truck. And
I've got to watch this movie.
Me too. I was like, wait,
What
I might have
is
seen
it?
it a long time ago, but I can't remember. Keep going. That sounds like a good scene.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
But like the crazy mountains are just in front of her and it just stops her in her tracks. And
know.
so yeah, I had this little manila envelope as a kid, my dream ranch in Montana, and I would draw blueprints of this ranch and collect real estate ads.
What?
And, oh yeah.
That's like dream boarding before dream boarding was big.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. I have to ask you, did you own a My Little Pony?
I did not.
No?
I was a Breyer girl. So the Breyer horse models, I had 100 of them.
I had a best
What?
friend who had horses, and she had all of them too. And we just tromp
Oh, yeah.
around with the horses.
Oh
Yep.
my gosh.
Big horse girl energy.
That's
So-
amazing. Oh, I think there's a genetic piece to that, right?
Yes.
With previous podcasts that we've had chats with. Oh, good. So you grew up in Colorado. What part of Colorado?
Northern Colorado, so Greeley, which is about an hour north of Denver.
Oh, you're out. You're rural.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What was that
Definitely.
like growing up?
It was fantastic. I feel very spoiled to have not only grown up in the Rocky Mountain region, the American West, which is a big piece of my heart and my identity, but with a bit of land. So we had 3 acres of a yard. That's where I spent the majority of my time, and under the blue spruces and cottonwood trees, and just I spent all day, every day outside. And I'm the youngest of my siblings by 8 and 10 years. So I was
wow.
an
Big
only
gap.
child.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, it
to
is.
entertain myself.
Yeah.
And
How many sisters and brothers?
one brother and one sister.
Oh, good. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Who was the older, the sister or the brother?
My sister was.
Your sister
Yeah.
was the oldest. How fun.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So you were out playing. Did you have horses?
I did not. My neighbors did, though.
Okay.
There was a time when I just got bored in my own yard and started exploring the neighborhood properties and getting into all the trouble. And my neighbors had about a dozen goats. And so that's what initially drew me to them, that I was feeding grass through the fence for the goats. Right. And then, of course, the horses were like, I went in on some of this action. And so they approached the fence. And in the book, I write about this as a pivotal moment of when horses are introducing themselves or exploring. There's this huff of warm air. And I say that's when the horse blew new life into me, because I wasn't into horses and a huge animal lover, but there's just something very different and captivating about them. And I kept coming back day after day, like truly was at this neighbor's house every single day, just observing. And after a while, they noticed me and included me in their chores and introducing me to horse behavior and maintenance, and I was hooked.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing neighbor.
Oh yeah.
unreal.
I have no idea how they tolerated me. I was like the Kimmy Gibbler of the horse world, just showing up all the time.
I love it. I love it. I love what you just said about how they breathed a breath of life, of interest into your being.
Yeah.
And that you can notice such a difference between them and the goats. Obviously, you didn't come back for the goats.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
No, it's
No.
horses and horses only.
Do you think it's because they have to decide whether or not they want? It's like this inviting piece. Back home, we have goats, and goats are just like, "What do you got in your hand?"
Exactly.
Horses are like, "I don't know about you." Did you feel that way?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's very different from dogs that I grew up with. And so I think I was observing of like, how do I get their attention? How do I get their interest? Because they do decide. And so it was this new language that I wasn't familiar with. I couldn't always bribe them with grass. That didn't always do the trick. So it was, wait, I don't know this language yet.
You know what? That's so interesting. I equate it to human beings. Some people are like, I don't know you.
Guarded and then they're different personalities.
And their energy is different. So then, but that's so fascinating. Now that can dive us deeper into some different But okay, so that's really interesting that you grew up, you got some exploration, you had a neighbor that was like, oh, she's curious, let's bring her in. And then, okay, so you got hooked. What does that mean? When did you start exploring, like getting your own horse or riding lessons? What's
Definitely.
that? Talk to us about that.
So there was the period of that I just was gathering information, checking books out from the library. Like my bulletin board was horse pictures. And as the youngest, so my sister was very involved in dance. My brother was very involved in soccer. So they had their identities. And I think for a while, my parents were like trying different things with me. And I was content, but just never had my thing. And then suddenly it was like horses.
Yeah.
And so very fortunate that I had parents that recognized that and encouraged that. And so they started helping me look for riding lessons. What does this look like? We'd go on trail rides. And they eventually found a horse for lease. And so I started leasing this horse, taking riding lessons, and now we were caring for this horse. His name was Redwind.
Oh, I like that name.
It's such a cool name. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So because as a parent, I'm just imagining your parents being like, okay, I've got this girl that wants to hang out with horses, and horses are not cheap.
No.
It's like, why can't you play soccer?
Yes.
And I pay my $150
and I get my
fee.
soccer ball and the cleats and
We're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a great alternative. I
Yes.
didn't know you could even lease horses.
Yeah. It's a nice kind of introduction. And without all the responsibility.
Exactly.
But still had to.
So they stayed at a stable and then, okay, nice. Yeah.
So what's some of the first interesting things that you learned about horses at a young age?
I would say there's some lessons I learned from my horse of I was just ready to jump on and gallop and jump and do all the things. And because you see it in the movies, you just slap the reins and go. And I got bucked off immediately. So it was that, oh no, girl, like slow and surely, like you have to learn and respect me. There is a lengthy learning process here. Yeah. And I like hobbies that require discipline, and so I gravitated to be like, I'm fine taking my time, and things have to be correct, and my gear has to be taken care of, my horse has to be taken care of first. So I'd say that, and then some indulgent pieces, like I would just feed them treats, and then learning that's actually not healthy for them. Like their diet, there's a lot of sugar and carrots, and so being like, that was more for me to feel like, oh, the horse likes me, or he's happy, and that's not great for them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, and it creates some naughty behavior. They start, again, looking through our hands and our pockets and pushy. So, nowadays I don't feed any treats from my hands.
So what do you do to get the horse to trust you and then acknowledge like reward type thing? What do you do?
Yeah, so they love affection. That's a piece of it. If I do feed them, whether it's treats or grain or some aspect, putting it in a bowl so they're not, again, associating my body or my hands with food.
Right.
And then they love a relationship. They're very relational beings. So trust, routine, familiarity.
Yes.
And
just like human beings.
Yes. Yeah.
Seriously. That's
Definitely.
amazing. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. And then horses learn from the release of pressure, which I'm sure when Sally came on the podcast spoke about this at length. So again, they don't like praise rewards, the positive reinforcement. The negative reinforcement is the release of pressure. So if we think about, we want the horse to move forward when we're riding. We squeeze our legs. They comply and move forward. We release that pressure.
Right.
So learning their language and understanding, like, how can I be calm in my body and show up for them, making them feel safe is how they develop trust. So,
Oh my gosh, I'm learning so much about horses. I'm about thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, maybe we should get one as a pet. No, no. It sounds
I'll
like a lot
lease
of
it
work.
from you.
But it does. There's such a long learning curve. But I also think too, wow, like what you do as a therapist with equine interventions, there's so much to be learned. And also I look at it from the standpoint of respect and give and take.
absolutely.
So there's a lot involved with that process. Let's move on towards, okay, so you were in high school. You started to develop this relationship and what you wanted to do with horses. You knew there was something in your life that was drawn to equine something, right?
Yeah.
So when you graduated high school, did you go on to college knowing that you had that piece in the back of your mind of something you were going to pursue?
Not necessarily.
Oh,
so
okay.
I graduated from high school and started college in New York as a nursing major. So I knew there was this kind of component, whether it was medical, healing, compassionate, and it felt close, but not quite. And so this New York school had the nursing program. They also had an NCAA equestrian team. So I was a college athlete, which seems ridiculous if you know me.
What?
That's awesome.
That is
That
awesome.
you found a school that had both things for you
Definitely.
too.
Yeah.
So I had that outlet and that, but it was a very different world. So my lack of good training growing up, I guess, in riding was apparent now that I'm in like the mid-Atlantic states where the hunter jumper world is very strong.
Yeah.
And rather than at that time was just a very angsty young woman, and rather than see this as a great opportunity to learn some riding, I was taking it out on myself as I'm not good enough, I don't belong.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
notice a different relationship with the horses there, or how they were treated in that way?
So when you have your own horse and lease, you're developing that relationship, the routine. I'm going out there every other day, picking the stalls, feeding, all those things. And then the way that this program was set up was the horses were tacked, ready to go. We just hopped on and rode and then handed them off to someone, and that was it. So yeah, I wouldn't even know the name of the horse I was riding most of the time. And part of the way that intercollegiate equestrian is set up is similar. So they were trying to help us learn, like, you hop on a horse and you assess very quickly of how can I make this horse go and perform without having a relationship with them, which is a skill, but it just broke my heart a little bit
Because it also makes it seem like the horses are performers. They're not,
Yeah.
their relationship isn't needed other than that.
you're not assessing their needs. It's perform right now because we're being judged.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't love that structure, but again, it taught me some good riding skills and maybe helped clarify what are the aspects of riding horses that I enjoy. It's not necessarily the performance and the showing, and it's more the horsemanship of the relational components of, like you were saying, Julie, of it's a give and take. So I can't always ask without giving something. And even watching the Olympics recently in the individual jumping, Pessoa is a world-renowned Brazilian jumper, and his horse was just going around after the fifth jump, knocking rails down, and he retired. And that was exiting, being like, I'm not going to continue my round. We'll disqualify ourselves. But that was recognizing my horse doesn't have the energy today, and it's not fair to ask them to continue performing at this level. Like, we're going to get injured, or I'm respecting that they're saying, like, I can't today. And I just thought that was huge. And
Fascinating. Because my thinking is, so it's interesting because your upbringing was a relationship build, right? Did you notice that most of the people on the East Coast, they didn't really have that relationship built, so they quite couldn't connect with you on that aspect?
Yeah, the horse world it's odd and it's divided. And I'd say I see that not only on the East Coast, but in any kind of event, or if you get into your discipline very deeply, again, it is that performance. There's money involved, there's ego. And unfortunately, you do see some of these kind of elite riders that are, again, my horse isn't performing, I'm going to be angry and upset, versus listening of what else is going on, their changes to their diet or their environment, or I need to listen, like, this isn't typical of them and I need to respect they might not be feeling well today. And so I think combining that, you can still have the high level jumpers or reining and something, but still also integrate the horsemanship. And when you see those come together, those are the most talented riders, in my opinion.
Can I ask you, then versus now that you can look back and see it, but then did you see that? Did you not recognize, like, something's not, I don't really have, I feel like this is just probably not the right environment to be in. Did you feel that way?
A little bit, but I would say also my mindset at that time, because my value was so contingent upon my appearance and my performance all the time, that I think I was a little myopic in it too, of what color ribbon did I get this week? And I want a different colored ribbon next week, versus I'm not happy and why. So
That's fascinating.
Well, you're also in a time in your life, everything's new. I'm in college, I'm trying these new sports, and
Well, and that measurement, right? So you're up against other people that are also in that same mindset. So you're surrounded by it. And I do think in your 20s, you're just trying to figure shit out. Excuse my language, but you're trying to figure shit out. And what energy's going where. And then sometimes when we're in that state of mind, our focus is maybe not in alignment with our belief systems, and it's misaligned, but we quite can't figure it out. And I found for myself, I don't know about you, Kate, and you as well, Emily, like in our 20s, it's that misalignment. You just can't quite
figure out why
pinpoint
am I not quite there?
Yeah. It's not working for me, but yet I'm still in it because I feel like everybody else is in it. Did you feel that way? Is that something that you can relate to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I started to dismantle at that point. So,
Yeah.
was the nursing major, and then I'm happiest in Colorado. I'd like to get back out there, but there wasn't a lot of nursing schools.
I
So
wanted
was
to
kinda
ask you,
stuck.
going from Colorado to New York is a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Definitely.
Yeah. What was that like for you?
Today's episode of the IWD406 Podcast is sponsored by Electric. Hey, this is Kate. Electric is my stage name when I'm a singer-songwriter. Okay, now that we've established this, we can move on. I've created a songwriting challenge for you to write your first song or your next one. To find out more about the Songs Inside You challenge, visit songsinsideyou.com today. We need lots of music in the world. Please write more songs.
It was rough, but then also in there, when I was 14, my parents and I moved to St. Louis. So I had that little hop, skip, and a jump going east, and I would say, I got to start heading west again.
Yeah.
But it was good to be exposed to the different kind of cultures in the U.S., of like the Midwest culture, and what I gained from that and took away from
What
that.
did you gain from being a Midwestern for a brief bit?
They're friendly, so the hospitality component.
Yes.
St. Louis got into baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals, so I
What?
can appreciate
No.
that. Yeah.
I'm a Cubs fan. Go ahead. Anyway,
It's postseason.
I won't hold that against you. But go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but I think it just helped me clarify that I do love the Western culture. It was a little of this bread and butter. The fact that I did equestrian was even odd. So it was like I think of high school identity. It's what, do you play football? Are you a cheerleader? It was just like a little bit where I was like, my friends that are rock climbers and mountain bikers, like, where do they fit in here? So I missed that a little bit. But no, I was very fortunate. Great high school. And then New York is a little different too.
Yes.
Now it's
Were you in like Manhattan area
Or upstate,
Yeah.
or what part of New York?
So
Yeah,
I was
it?
in Westchester County. That's like 40 minutes north of Manhattan. So it was the best of both worlds for me, because I don't know that I would have done well in Manhattan. That's a lot of stimulation. It's its own environment.
Yeah.
But I could get on the train and go there in 40 minutes. So could go to the Met and all those things.
Were you close to as well, Kate? Are you that close to Manhattan?
We were
growing
like
up?
5 hours, but there's a time I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is
Okay, yeah.
kind of
Very
same.
close.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys have similar experiences with it all.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very cool. So then you left New York, came back to Colorado. Then what?
Yeah, so then I was a psychology major and just felt, again, that congruence of my values. I loved studying psychology. I was passionate about it. I was in the environment of Colorado that I grew up in, and just connected to like a culture and a mindset that felt good to me, in connection to nature. And I started leasing a horse. So it was all the things started coming
You're like,
together.
I'm
Nice.
back.
Yeah,
I'm back.
totally.
So then did you
It always feels good when you're what direction you're going into.
Definitely. And it feels good.
and feel like you're home?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
most people like don't ever really find home and solace. And you came back to home and solace. And then you were done with your master's studies, right? Or did you go for your master's studies in Colorado?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what did you go for?
Clinical counseling.
Clinical counseling. And then did you come out and start practicing? Because I know they go through a little
Yeah.
bit of a process.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to us
So
about that.
I was fortunate. I tried to start my first LLC as an
Yes.
independent contractor, because doing the equine assisted psychotherapy is challenging in the fact that there aren't necessarily like careers or jobs. You have to make it yourself and partner as an independent contractor with different barns and therapeutic riding centers.
Yeah, because
which
there's
is what I
probably
did.
nothing really. It seems like now with Path, it's grown more, but
Definitely.
It's not a well-known
no.
method of therapy, I don't think.
Yeah, and I want to know.
And I think it should be known more. But
yes, and I want to know with what you were connected. Did you know that equine therapy existed with counseling? Like,
Yeah.
you did know?
No, sorry, I did not know.
You did not know. Okay.
There was a moment in undergrad, my senior year, I knew I had to go to grad school if I wanted to use psychology as a career, but I was a research assistant, and I was in the very micro level of psychology, of kind of, you have to measure everything. So I was thinking cognitive neuroscience. Like, I didn't want to interact with people. I wanted to be in my lab. And that's when Sandy Hook happened. And in the aftermath of that, I saw this group of volunteers who who brought golden retrievers in as comfort animals to the victims and their families. And that was just a massive aha moment for me. Like, I knew service animals. I was familiar with PATH and adaptive riding, but I'd never known that there was this legitimate field of using psychotherapy, mental health counseling, and animals. So that was that. My passion and love for animals and psychology, like, who else is doing this, aside from the golden retrievers?
Yeah, my dog. I do want to know, we're going to go back a little bit in a moment in time. So you, during the Sandy Hook period, because I think, wasn't it Columbine was first?
Yes.
And then Sandy Hook was like not too far after that. How did that impact you, being from Colorado, knowing... Man, that was such a terrifying experience.
Definitely. Yeah, I was very young for Columbine, age 6, and definitely have the memory coming home from school. And my babysitter at the time was watching it on TV.
Yeah.
And I think it just rocked all of our worlds. I mean, especially being young, I didn't think that would happen to me, but there's an enormous amount of community pride around it and supporting the school. And now as an adult, how often you run into students who had survived. And you
do run into them?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just the trauma, the long-term trauma with that. And I know service animals weren't really a thing during that time.
Yeah.
So do you know roughly when they started bringing alternate type therapies into the school? Because I can't imagine, as a parent, would you, Kate, go back? I want to send my kid back there. It'd be horribly hard to do that. And there's no alternative, because if you're a public state school kid, you really can't shuffle around to another school.
And if you're remote, definitely there's not a lot of options.
No. And so I can't even imagine, and probably you at the age of 6 for Columbine. And then Sandy Hook, you said how old you were?
I would have been a senior, so maybe 21. Yeah.
I mean, not even being at Sandy Hook, but being in another school. Were people talking about going back to school, and did they also feel it, like that tertiary trauma?
I would say, my gosh, I knew I did this. I hear clients and friends talk about it. As you're sitting in a lecture hall, like, you'd rehearse if there was an active shooter, what would I do? And now schools are rehearsing active shooter drills with young kids. And when I was working more with adolescents, they would almost be like a little bit traumatized by the training itself. Like,
my sister's a teacher, and she's, it's horrible. We're like locked down.
Yes.
Everybody get in a corner. Here's a bucket if you have to pee, and we're going to put up this little thing. And it is,
my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm from the Midwest, so this is not anywhere comparison, but we had a lot of tornadoes.
Yeah.
And we'd constantly do tornado drills, like, all throughout the year. And I would have nightmares about being in a tornado just from the training. So you really hit the nail on the head on that.
Yeah.
Or fire drills. I know we have to have education and some awareness and safety, but man, it really can induce trauma on little kids, because they're going there in their mind without it even ever happening. Right. So did you end up, when you moved back to Colorado, did you work with any of those types of patients? Is that a HIPAA issue that I'm talking about? But did you work with anybody that had dealt with Sandy Hook?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah. I have had some clients who have experienced a mass shooting.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, they're somewhat common. And so it's only a matter of time before you run into someone.
But I hate to say it, sorry, Kate, your experience being raised in Colorado, knowing that all of a sudden now we've got protocols in place, and that did not happen where I'm from.
Okay.
It's probably a blessing to those clients of yours. You can actually be there with them, because I think it's a wonderful thing that you're able to do that. Unfortunate situation in the culture and society in Colorado, and having to be on that awareness alert type feeling, but to be able to offer that to I get you. Yeah. That's pretty amazing. Go ahead, Kate.
I was going to say, your experience with trauma when you worked at the mustard seed ranch too.
Yeah, I want to know about that.
Because that's mostly young adults that have gone through trauma. Definitely. And then that's where they work with horses. And I was on the website today. I was like, okay, 16-week course. I'm like, oh, that's a good time to make a relationship with a horse. And they're doing the chores, and they're having that thing. You want to tell us a little bit more about that experience? And so that was after college, or when? Okay.
Yeah. So after I tried to do it on my own and was like, wow, I'm not making enough money to make ends meet. I don't know that I can do equine assisted psychotherapy, and was just feeling a little in a rut. I had this fortunate call that someone was like, hey, I thought of you. I had this conversation with this woman, and her husband runs a nonprofit called Mustard Seed Ranch, and they're looking for someone to start a location here in Colorado, and I recommended you. And so to actually have not only the structure of a nonprofit, but like a salary in that world was huge. Like, I hit the jackpot.
You did.
So I had this ranch, and what we focused on was adolescents who had experienced trauma, abuse, neglect. And so we provided free equine assisted groups for them to come up. So it was a lot of residential treatment programs, and like, absolutely, the trauma is deep. And so since they were already doing individual counseling or group therapy, like, I could just focus on the equine component of it, which actually allowed a lot of freedom for them just to be themselves. And yes, there was structure. There were lesson plans integrating not only psychotherapy tools and skills with the horsemanship, but I had a lot more of the kind of epiphany moments in just allowing them to have the space and the freedom to be around horses.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was...
Because it seems to be a good time to build trust or something like,
Especially residential programs, they don't even have personal belongings a lot of the time, no access to animals if they've been ripped out of their homes.
Right.
They don't have pets anymore. Again, there's a lot of discipline and expectations, and I think they just build up this kind of like rigid kind of tolerance. That's, what do you want from me? I'm always in trouble. Yeah. And so just to be like, all right, like, as long as you're following the rules and safe, and like, you can ride a horse today, and we'll show you how to do that.
Yeah. What was a common theme that you saw? Was it a trust issue that people experience? You said trust. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if that was a common thing with the trauma, PTSD, and that you had just mentioned.
Definitely. I would say there were some kiddos that were in foster care and just were struggling to find a placement, or angry at their parents for whatever circumstances landed them there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there was one program that was the opposite end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So it was very privileged kids. And then my parents volunteered me to be in this program away from home. And then I also worked with sex trafficking survivors. And
you
so
did.
That's some big
enormous trust. Yeah.
Enormous
definitely.
trust. Wow.
Yeah.
What, I mean, the breadth of the type of client that you work, what do you use for techniques?
Yeah.
There has to be, you have to have a bunch of tools in your bag.
Yes.
Okay, talk to us a little bit about that.
Definitely. So just a few years ago, 3 years ago, actually, I was on this of, I'm seeing more and more trauma. Horses heal a lot, but they don't heal everything. And I was like, I want to be way more confident in this work. I really like knowing people's stories. And again, the mind-body awareness. And so I found EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And this is a method, a training technique in psychotherapy that helps regulate our nervous system. So it's integrating our entire body into it. And so now with that training, 3 years of practicing it, it's the majority of my caseload now. I feel so confident going into these stories, whether it's deep, heavy trauma, like some of the stories that you're like, my hair is turning white hearing this. And then just we've all experienced trauma.
Yeah.
So on the other end of the spectrum, it can be how we view ourselves in relationships, our self-worth, bullying that we grew up with. I'm not good enough is probably the biggest trauma that I address.
Yeah.
And it's a method that uses bilateral stimulation, and the eye movement factor is like the client would follow my fingers across their field of vision back and forth, which is mimicking that REM sleep cycle, which is what we know, like when we're dreaming, our brain is processing and filtering out information. So it's a very effective and I would say permanent kind of healing method. And what's so cool is the client is having those realizations in the moment. So I'd say, notice the bullying incident in 6th grade and the words, I'm not good enough. And I tell them to check in after the eye set. What are you noticing now? And it can be a body reaction of my hands are shaking and closing into fists. I'm so angry. Okay, just notice that. And then maybe they have an aha moment of, oh, that's where I met my best friend. Like they interjected in that bullying. And so they remember that more. And so we take this heavy kind of reactionary trauma and now they see it more neutrally. So it's really cool to hear a client make those connections in a session.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I like the connection part too, because they're becoming more aware of their body, what they're thinking. What are you feeling? Oh, my hands are clenched, so I'm angry. And but I have a happy thought too. And
definitely.
Yeah.
There's two things
neat.
Two things I want to point out, and I'm just going to assert my opinion on this. I think EMDR, you light up when you talk about it. And the reason being is because this is my thoughts, is because you initially wanted to go into research, correct?
Yes.
So EMDR requires a lot of observation by the therapist. So they're watching how you're responding. They're making notes. They're jotting, okay, when she hit this part of her trauma, resurgence or not relapse, what would you call it? Recall, right? You notice that is that part right there where her body must have took on that emotional energy. And I think EMDR plays into your research.
That's right?
A
great point.
Right?
Yeah.
What a great fit. And you seem passionate about it and you're seeing results. So it's an effect. Do you have the whole system, like the board where you watch the lights and the paddles?
Yeah.
What?
I have the buzzies.
The
buzzy paddles.
Okay, gotcha.
But they follow my arm, and we'll see if I need like a rotator cuff surgery.
A buzzy paddle doesn't sound good. Can you explain that?
Oh,
what does that do?
Explain that.
Yeah. So they're, again, the bilateral stimulation. So they're these handheld little devices that you hold in either hand, and they just vibrate. They pulse back and forth at this like marching tempo. So some clients that would be distracted by the eye sets, they like to close their eyes and just hold the image in their mind. And then when I do virtual sessions on telehealth with EMDR, I instruct them to do a tapping. technique. And so that's another method too.
It's a lot of somatic type work that's being brought in, correct?
Yes.
So now my other question is, are you doing any, I think it's called diffracting, where they bring in, let's say you're in deep trauma, sexual trauma. Let's just give that example, okay? And maybe you're the moment of walking through the door and then your predator is there and it's that in-between zone, right? Do you then create you can see the client starting to build up like that anxiety. Do you do a distraction method where it makes them, now I want you to think about a tree, where you're distracting and kind of intercepting that neurochemical, that neurotransmitter link, so you can then create a new neural pathway?
Yeah, I don't.
You don't do that. Okay.
Yeah. So
sorry,
if I notice,
that's a little deep, but yeah.
You're good.
Okay.
If I notice distress, again, I always say we never want to flood our system. There's nothing, again, if we're going to activate fight or flight, it's not effective.
Right.
So I use the image of a pendulum. Like we're going to go in and we're going to come out. And so if I notice that they're distressed, I offer that we take a time to breathe. And we have a method called the safe calm state already instilled.
Yep.
And if someone is very distressed, we will then use that tool.
Yeah.
But it is teaching our nervous system, like it's okay to go there or to listen of maybe it's too much, I need a pause. And so letting them go at their own pace. So yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like it takes several sessions before the first session, I'm assuming, is a powerful moment, right? Because you're learning what to do.
Yes.
And then obviously there's a lot of buildup before you actually dive into EMDR. You need to learn your client and what's going to work, and then getting your top five traumas. And then working on kind of that SUD scale. SUD is like basically an analysis of, I'm overstepping, but analysis of like, how heavy was that trauma?
Yes.
How impactful was that trauma? And then you work based off of your list. The reason why I know is I've done EMDR. So
amazing.
It is amazing. Yes. And then you go into this building up to get into EMDR.
Yes.
And then how many sessions have you seen for an average person that it actually becomes, okay, I'm shifting in how I feel about my traumatic experiences?
Yeah. So I call the first session kind of the learning curve, because it's awkward, it's new. People are like, what should I be noticing? What do you want to hear? It's a very different method. So I almost toss the first one out for most people. And I let them know that. Let's just get to know the technique, the method. Some people gravitate to it immediately. And if probably by the second session, I'm not seeing something, we take a step back. But I would say definitely by the second session is people where they do that, oh my gosh, I just had this thought or this random memory came up, and then they're bought into it. They're like, this is pulling something new and different up, and I'm curious.
I want to know, because the brain is so fascinating. I'm just going to throw this another little thing out there. But post EMDR, any sort of psychological work, mental health work, I felt like when it starts to be more effective is when it's on the off time, when I'm not in front of the therapist. I'm all of a sudden I'm recalling fun memories or things that, because when we get bogged down and we are in the constant mode of chronic fight or flight, it's hard for us to think about anything
It's hard to
happy.
get out of it. All you're doing is leading one thought to the next to keep you there sometimes.
Exactly. Or you literally can't recall certain fun memories of your life. But when therapy is effective, you start having these little pop-ups of smell that's like, oh, what is that? That smell reminds me of something. A lot of people that are in chronic state of trauma or PTSD, or they can't recall very well, or they just don't. Sometimes they're desensitized, and that's that dissociative piece, right? Yeah. So I think these types of things, when people are listening, explore, because there is such a fantastic benefit that I don't even think sometimes people can tap into on the back end,
Yeah.
which is memories of your life as a child where you can recall candles at grandma's house.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things that popped up when I was going through it. And I felt, I should tell my therapist about this. Do you get that?
Yeah, and we love that feedback.
Absolutely.
Just a little, this is what I'm noticing. And especially with EMDR, again, the psychosomatic components of emotional trauma. So hearing clients, I've had some come in of, I'm suffering from nightmares that are affecting my relationship. They're so vivid and real. To doing a couple sessions of EMDR, they went from 28 nightmares a month to 3 after 3 EMDR sessions.
Only 3
That's
sessions.
Yeah. So just know
amazing.
Quite a record
that's
there.
a huge effect in someone's life.
Yeah.
Or endometriosis has roots in sexual trauma. And I had somebody actually recently with ulcerative colitis and again was like, I'm symptom free after several sessions of this, to be like, not saying it's a miracle cure, but it's very effective. There's a lot of pieces that go into it, but just being like, wow, you're okay now. And now you're living this like depth in your life and the quality of life is increased. So
It gives hope for people who have tried maybe traditional, with what you call talk therapy maybe,
Yes.
or something in that way. And if they're not comfortable with it, there are other options for you. You can even do it through telehealth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
call up
I
Emily
love
and
that.
try something new.
Yeah, for sure. I want to switch topics because we brought up something about sexual health and women. And I know you went and did some advocacy work for women that struggle with accessibility to period products.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a member of the Junior League of Denver, and Denver was unique in the sense that it was the first and now one of the few junior leagues that has a lobbyist and this legislative branch a part of it. And so I wanted to learn more about that world. It's intimidating, again, being in the psychology healthcare world. I'm like, I have no idea what goes on in the state capitol. So we learned about it. And then so it's a nonpartisan, we supported any nonpartisan kind of efforts that would help alleviate women or children out of systemic poverty. And so the lobbyists would pull bills like, hey, do you want to support this housing initiative, and stamp the Junior League of Denver on it? And part of that was we could testify at the state capitol on behalf of bills. And Senate Bill 1164, I believe, was mandating the majority of Colorado middle schools and high schools had to start supplying feminine hygiene products. And so at first I was like, oh, that's nice. And just like the surface level was like, okay, cool. But then diving in deep to it, I didn't realize, one, that no state WIC or SNAP benefit programs, so like the food assistance like benefits, cover period products.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
So then you're looking at, this is a socioeconomic gap. It's 1 in 4 teen girls say that they can't afford period products. And
1 in 4?
yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and then they polled, and 84% of teenage girls said that their period or lack of access to period products inhibited them from participating in school or after school activities.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when you see it that way and you're just hit in the face with this stuff, if we're trying to close the gender gap or socioeconomic gap, like, we should be providing basic hygiene products.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was where it was like, this is a huge, like, why aren't we doing this? We provide paper towels and toilet paper. Why
And
aren't
that's
there?
the biggest thing. Yes, these things are in the bathroom, and feminine hygiene products need to be there too.
But wait a
Exactly.
minute.
Yeah.
But we know from Tammy Fisher's episode, they took them out. Remember that? Where she was talking about how they took the tampon dispensers out of the public.
Because they used to have them, but they weren't free. Yeah.
Oh.
The 25 cents.
Yes.
Oh, you're
it-
right.
Dial
That's
it
right.
in.
Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They-
Okay.
They always charged you when I was growing
Right.
up.
I mean, I always came prepared. I was like, I don't want to be that girl that
I
doesn't
was
have.
never regular, so I never knew.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh. I was like, it's coming. I know it's coming because I was a real BITC age the week
Yeah,
before.
but if you didn't have money
Yeah.
to afford them, then
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy buckets. That's
And
crazy.
I'm sure from Tammy, she talked about like a lot of school nurses or teachers would provide them out of pocket. But then what do you do when it comes unexpectedly and you're sitting in a stall and you have class in 1 minute and you're going to walk through the halls, like feeling uncomfortable, trying to get to the nurse's office to ask for this thing, go to the bathroom
Yeah.
again.
Use half a roll of toilet paper between your legs. If you
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Holy,
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So then, okay, did it get did this?
Did.
It did? Okay,
Yes.
good. Yay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they were looking for volunteers, and I just had this moment of, oh my God, I can be Elle Woods for a day, and I am
Yes.
taking this opportunity.
Yes.
And so, yeah, always working on public speaking
Right.
skills and stuff. It was nerve wracking, but again, what a cool way to see like the process of how a bill gets passed, or testimony on both sides. And it's amazing how many people were opposed to this for silly reasons.
Was it money? Like,
Money,
what
but it was like,
besides-
it would cost the state $100,000 a year, which is a
that's
drop
a,
in the
that's a
bucket.
little penny in the bucket.
Wow.
And then there was the argument of, are teens going to misuse them for a TikTok challenge? And you were just like,
What?
okay, this is all hypothetical, that this would happen, like vandalism. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those were the big arguments.
Talk got involved in this
Yes,
one?
of course.
That's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, congratulations on having it
Yes.
passed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of women out there who are happy, and thank you.
Yeah,
Without
exactly.
even knowing that it was you.
Yes.
More and more states are now passing them. And
That's good.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. I have to ask you, was it an Elwood moment?
100%.
Was it really?
Yeah. Oh, I loved it.
Did you really? I would be so nervous. Like, what was that like, walking into the Capitol and doing it?
It was cool. There was a big press conference around it, and they asked us to wear pink. So then it's like all these women wearing pink and
Yeah.
talking about it. And there was a lot of medical providers there talking and advocating on it and testifying. It was just like, woo, like strong feminine energy. And you're like, I could kick a door off its hinges right now.
Yes. That's amazing. Oh man, that's really cool, Emily. Okay, so let's move forward to moving to Montana and then what you're doing now in Montana. How are you helping patients up here?
Yeah, I love it up here.
You do. When did you move here?
I moved here in 2019.
Okay, got you. So
Yeah.
not too long ago.
Yeah, not too long.
How has it been moving from Colorado to Montana and then establishing your practice up here?
Good. Yeah, it's been a learning curve. Again, I didn't really anticipate going off on my own, but found myself with no choice. And now I'm so grateful for that period of my life that pushed me out of my comfort zone. I love the mountain lifestyle. I love the horse community, but really, essentially, the community of Whitefish has kept me here for so long.
Really?
The sense of community is struggling in the rest of the country and the rest of the world, where you feel isolated and fractured. And so I love the fact that people know what's going on. You run into town and people recognize you,
Yeah.
and like the connections of, oh, you need to talk to this person, and I know them. I love that feeling.
I love
So-
that for you. Talk to us a little bit about, did you write the book up here?
Part of it. Yeah, I started it up here.
Oh, you did start
Oh,
up here.
nice.
Share
I
with
didn't know that.
our
Yeah.
listeners a little bit about your book.
Definitely. This kind of started a little bit with the equine therapy world. I noticed the majority of my clients were 12 to 14-year-old girls, and I started seeing a lot of myself in them, of kind of the introverted, quiet girl that preferred the company of animals, but was struggling with emotions and expressing them. And not only was I their therapist, but I recognized I was a bit of a role model and a mentor.
Okay.
And at first it was, whoa, boundaries, or I don't know, am I a role model? And then leaning into it of what would I tell my younger self as they're talking about flirting with boys and wearing makeup or relationships with their parents. It was that like little nugget of wisdom. Like, how could I just give you a little, maybe think of it this way? And so I started.
We need that though.
Yes.
Yes. We
Everybody
do need
needs a
that.
little direction. Just like,
Definitely. And I think the parents were receptive to that it's like, it can't always come from the parents at that age of who are like, it's a teacher, a coach, somebody like that in their life that's just one more perspective.
because it's nice to get a different perspective, because it's not, you're not telling me because you love me and you're my parent. You're telling me because you actually have concern for me. And I think people feel that when it's from someone else. Oh, maybe you should look at it this way or something like that.
Definitely.
And a kind little way to say it.
Teens are very resistant to their parents.
Yes.
Yes. Let's not go down that road. Yes. And also, too, I like the idea that an outside person gives a different perspective on it. As parents, I feel we have one way of viewing the world. We have one way of viewing our children and how that's going to look for them. But having a valuable person from the outside looking in and saying, you know what? Your parents are right. Let's take this into consideration. And also, too, knowing that you've had life experiences. So they probably lean into you going, she's a wise person that has a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So then, okay, are those components in the book?
They are.
They are. Okay, let's talk about that.
So each chapter is named and structured after one of the interventions I teach with horses. So it goes into a little bit of the why, the setup, what that activity looks like, maybe how I learned the larger lesson for me in my own timeline, and then pairing it with a client as they experienced it as well.
Oh. Fascinating.
So you have client stories in the book too.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Share with us one little story. Do you mind?
Okay.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's one, how heavy do we want to go?
Oh, we can go as deep as we want to go.
Okay. Yeah. So one story that kind of came up as I was writing kind of my own story, and I recommend anyone write out their life story, whether you want to publish it, use it, just document it. It was so cathartic. And it really helped me re-examine some things. Like, again, wait, this doesn't add up. So one of those for me that didn't expect to uncover was my first sexual experience. And I felt ashamed about it at the time growing up, didn't talk about it. In my 20s when I was like, oh, this was actually statutory rape, but didn't, again, process that, didn't want to like associate with that name or that title.
Right.
Yeah. And then writing it out, actually, I was like, there was a lot of grooming and manipulation on their part. And so I paused with it, did my own therapy. And I talk about a client who was also processing that held on for decades, that they were a bad person because they'd had an affair with their professor, and unpacking it, being like, you were a minor. There was a ton of grooming and manipulation on that part too, of this was your professor that would write little comments in the margins of your paper and like, again, get that attention that you wanted so badly. And so that's one of the stories, probably the heaviest part or the most disclosing that I tell in this book, because I think it's more common than we realize. And even my editor mentioned, this happened to me too. And so I think it's just, my hope would be people would examine those stories or experiences to be like, I didn't realize how much this did impact me or my view of self or my relationships. And then to be aware with our own teenagers of, hey, the attention from the older guy is flattering, but here's why it's inappropriate. It's not like you're going to get in trouble. They're not concerned for your well-being. They see a young, impressionable, vulnerable person that you throw some compliments and a couple dates at. They're seeking you for their own gratification. So
Yeah.
That's a good thing to put across too.
This could go into a whole different conversation, but man, you're getting me thinking in regards to like, just first, I want to say what you just said is everyone should write their own story, because sometimes we don't process things that's happened to us in our lives, especially when dating. Early concepts around what being romantic or being intimate with the person is about. And a lot of times I read something the other day about how women often learn what the ideal relationship is from television. And I don't know about you guys, but looking back at like our 80s, family ties,
the Waltons, Little House on the Prairie.
Like I'm looking back going like, those were my examples that I was like looking at as far as what the Huxtables, and great family dynamic, but that's not reality. And so we're looking to somebody to teach us and tell us what it's supposed to be and the reality of it. And then when we do have our first sexual encounter, the way that they depict it on television is it's just not what it is in reality.
Sometimes they make it out like, oh, the woman was picked and you're just like this special girl because you have gained this man's affection, not even affection, eyes, even attention.
Yeah. And then you cross compare. Do I ask somebody else about their story of their first time having sex? And then you don't even, sometimes that's because of the shame, or I'm going to sound stupid if I ask that. Or as women, we need each other to have these conversations, because oftentimes what we know instinctively wasn't right. We just often dismiss it and go, okay, maybe that was normal.
Yeah.
And you brought up some really good points and future conversations that we need to have on this podcast.
Yes.
Thank you for talking about that. Such powerful stuff. I do want to ask, so you started the book before 2019 or in 2019?
I probably would have started in 21, 22. It took me about 2 years to write.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you, the process of writing. So you said it was therapeutic for you. It absolutely helps you be, honestly, probably a better, I don't want to say better, but more well-rounded therapist for your clients. Don't you feel that way? Because you now are like, I can see how they're thinking is how they're thinking and how they're processing this, because I took the time to process my own experiences. Do you feel that way?
Yeah. And it's been interesting. Part of the process was, again, why would someone care about my story? Because this was not the narrative in writing a book that I wanted to go down and sharing stuff about me. It felt like a little like me.
Yes.
So that's why I integrated some client stories, some horse knowledge that I just wanted it to be well-rounded. It's one example.
Yeah.
And then that component of, wow, I'm putting this out here.
Yes.
What are my clients going to think if they read the book? And so I kept it hush and quiet and separate. But the first client that read the book actually came forward and was like, you gave me a lot of things I need to think about in therapy too. And so I think it was good of this invitation. And I know a lot of people talk about, I come into a therapy session and I tell my side of the story and they have so much curiosity. What is my therapist like?
Sure.
And we're taught, do not share anything.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky slope, but I have found if I disclose a little bit here and there with clients that they're like, I know you as a person. I feel like I know you a little bit more. Thank you for being vulnerable. It's not so one-sided, but in a way that's, okay, is this benefiting the client? Is it distracting? And yeah.
I like that idea too, because then it gives a human connection rather than a doctor-patient connection. And it's, no, there's a human connection. I know you care. I'm a little give and take, just like the horses.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it is going through therapy. It is intimidating to sit down on a couch, and I'm fairly a deeply private person. So just even to take the step to make the call, to get it on the schedule. And then the week leading up to going, oh shit, I got to meet this new therapist and I got to divulge stuff. So, but to have somebody that's sitting across and listening to you and obviously has that expertise of like thinking about how you're thinking and has that knowledge and wisdom and especially training, but then also to know that they actually do care. That's the part I'm like, does she really give a shit? She sees about 8 people a day. I'm like, does she really care about my story? So in my head is to bring that human element back. Yeah, I do care. I care about you. And so there's been some moments in my life that I can relate to that.
Yeah.
That does make a person feel good and they want to open up more.
Yeah. And we were taught in grad school that the connection we have to our therapist is anywhere from 70 to 80% the effectiveness of therapy. So not the training, not the techniques, it's how comfortable do you feel with that person? And I will tell people right away if they're shopping for a therapist, like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I want you to find that person that you can let the guard down with. And by showing that of like, this is who I am. And
so good. So good. So when you released the book, how did that make you feel?
It was good. It was a big goal and a weight off my chest. There was times where I was like, I just want this to be done and for it to be out there. Right. And it's still in that receiving feedback stage.
When was it released?
This April.
Was it really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Where can people buy it at?
Yeah, so mostly Amazon. There's a couple places here in town in Whitefish. So it's at Bookworks and then Barnes & Noble on their website. I don't have any copies in store currently, but I might start branching out to some other local businesses too. But summer hit and everyone was super busy. So.
May I ask you, have you considered doing a talk around it, like at the Logan Health Center or?
Yeah.
You should.
I would love to. Finding the right audience and partnering with some people or whatever that would look like. I would love to share that. So
absolutely. Oh my gosh, Emily, you're amazing. Okay, we're going to transition to our last 3 questions. I'm going to start. All right. So no, actually, you're starting, Kate. You're up.
I'm up.
You're up.
Okay. Question number 1. What is the meaning of peace to you?
Yeah, and I loved this one. This one kind of put me back on my heels. So I was like, everyone should define this for themselves. But to me, I thought about it, what it feels like, and I had this like sensation in my chest. And I was like, I think peace comes internally. It's the external or internal validation rather than seeking it externally. And I think that internal peace comes when we know we're living in congruence with our values, that it's and fully in the present moment. I'm not thinking about the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, what's coming around the corner. It's just I'm where I'm supposed to be here now.
Yeah,
yes,
I like that.
Do you feel? I'm going to ask you, girls.
What?
Do you all feel you're in the space of time where you're like, I feel where I'm supposed to be. I feel I am where I'm exactly supposed to be. Do you feel that way, Kate?
I do when I'm on my morning walk with my dog, and that's like my favorite time. That's where I find peace. I just feel, I'm one with the world today, and just things are just good.
I love that.
Around.
Yeah.
That's a good way to start the day.
It is a good way.
Yeah, this feels good today.
Yeah. Is there something like that with you, Emily?
Yeah, I just feel at a time of my life, like right now, I'm very fortunate that I feel that this is where I'm supposed to be.
I love that. I love seeing people say that. There's just something in their energy field that's, yep. They're in that moment. And that's wonderful to watch. Yeah. So I wanted to share that. Our next question is, would you rather ride on a flying horse or travel through the ocean on a seahorse? How fun is that
it's
question?
Like the Pegasus or the seahorse?
Always the Pegasus.
Yes, me too. Good. Okay.
Yeah, I'm such a dreamer. I live with my head in the clouds, and I was like, I would be up in the sky for sure.
I mean, can you imagine like flying around on a horse?
That would be so cool.
Yeah, I can. I'm more of a seahorse. I want to be in the ocean going, the unknown of no one's explored that part. Mm-hmm. We have the ocean that no one's explored. And I'm like, I got to go see that.
I want to be on top of the
first.
mountains.
Oh, you want to be on top of mountains?
That's why in the air you can do that.
That's true. That is true. Where would you be at? Where would you go if you were a flying horse?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Yeah, probably like the Canadian Rockies, like some really remote places that are hard to get to.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I love that question. It was my favorite question. You're up, Kate.
If you could pass the mic to a Montana woman so that they could share their story on IWD406 Podcast, who would it be and why?
Yeah, so that would be Nicole Erickson here in Whitefish. She was behind Unleashed Winery. And so when I first started getting to know her, it was in a professional role, and I just really admired like the breadth of that business, of you're creating a product, you're distributing, you have employees, this huge space. So just impressed with how much she managed on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But then I noticed this pattern. She was always positive and grounded and approachable. And I was like, man, you have a lot of responsibility, yet you just always present with this energy that's very calm and attractive. And as I've gotten to know her now more personally, that energy has attracted a group of women around her that reflects the same things.
Yeah.
They all own their own businesses, are creatives and just fun and personable and caring and compassionate. And I just see her as the middle of that and like the magnet. So yeah, I would love to see her entrepreneurial mind, what she has in line next and where she's going. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And speaking of, what are you going to be doing next?
Oh my gosh, lots of fun things.
Yeah, I want to know.
So I'm hosting a retreat,
Okay.
a wellness retreat
Awesome.
around like winter mental health and the horses here in Whitefish in November. Yeah, so there'll be sound baths and all the fun things like that going on. And then
Where's that going to be at?
Clydesdale Outpost.
Nice. That's the perfect place for it.
Yeah,
Good job, girl.
very fun.
Yes.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's coming up in November. And then do you have anything else on the horizon? Future goals?
Yeah, right now I'm content a little bit. I would like to grow my practice. So I'm thinking of hiring a therapist under me and growing again, whether it's mind body wellness or EMDR. And so just furthering that impact.
We need that.
Nice.
Yeah.
The Valley needs that. Thank you so much.
Of course.
You are such a gem.
You are.
Oh, you guys
loved
too.
having this conversation with you. And honestly, we could have branched off into various conversations from earlier on. Gosh, Emily, you're a star, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
Appreciate it.
joining
Yep.
us and being vulnerable.
Yes.
Of course.
You know,
Well,
sharing
thank
the
you
stories.
for creating this platform and inviting me to participate.
Absolutely.
A special thank you to our podcast guest. You can find all of her links in the description of this episode. If you like what you heard, please hit subscribe. You will be notified of future podcast guests. Follow us on our social media platforms and stay tuned for our next podcast chat with an amazing Montana woman.